my favorite subject to talk about, posture. On the first day, we have a full schedule with all these wonderful speakers sitting in front of me that are going to help us out. In those early years, I was the only guy, and it was tough, only from the standpoint that I'm not sure what people really wanted to hear about posture. We're going to talk about some things I talked way back about, about 20 years ago, and hopefully it'll mean more. It'll shed, there'll be a little bit more opportunity to kind of now look what's happened in the last 2-3 decades with this material and where it's gone and where it's continuing to go. So yeah, I'm excited about the next 4 days. I'm excited just to talk to you again. And to be frank with you, I always tell Jen, I need this at the end of the year. Every year is a busy year for us. But I need this, Jen. We need this because it pulls us back together and we talk about what's really important here. These two bodies we own. And what's really important about that is that a lot of people still don't even understand that, that they have this thing called a middle of your body, this septal part of your body that has an airway, an esophagus, and a brainstem and a spine that is really truly regulated by hemispheric activities. And we get 4 days to discuss it, which is really not enough time, but we're going to get through it the best way we can. I can tell you right now, as I start this morning off, and I reflected on this again on my drive in, there's no way, Paul, I'm going to cover every and, the, it, but, and we, or you in that manual. There's just no way I'm going to do that. And I don't know how the other speakers are going to do it, but I'll bet they're not. So what we're going to do is do the best we can and get through the most information we can. And keep in mind, we got some people here going through certification this week. We're really excited about that. And we're trying to keep us all apprised of the fact that we're all here with different levels and different knowledge bases of PRI. Some of us have been around for a long time. You don't have to be a faculty member to be around here for a long time. Chris, I look at you this morning and you've been around here a long time. And so when you start looking at where we're at and what levels we're at in our daily lives and what levels we're really wanting to go at with this science, there's a mixture, there's a bag full of everything. So keep that in mind. We're going to try to make sure that all of you are somewhat represented in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. But truth be told, Jen put this book in front of me about a week ago and she goes, what changes do you want? And honestly, there are very few. There are very few. We always add a few. We always build off of a few, right, Jen? I don't think we added that much this year. We had some slides. Oh, yeah. And I think conceptually, we feel comfortable. We're really comfortable with this science, and it's been around a long time. Some of these pages, Skip, haven't changed at all since day one. Some of them actually have gotten even a little bit shorter and a little bit longer because of input from people like you. So keep that in mind. I think the main thing is the main thing that I just said is this science isn't changing. It was there from day one. We're just trying to find it. We're just trying to catch up with it. And there's no way any of us in this room are going to ever catch up with this science. That's just not going to happen. But what we do know is we got a pretty good platform. We'll start off this morning. We're going to talk about it right off the bat. I want to introduce the 4 days to you as briefly as I can. When I put this course together years ago, I thought it's really important for us to understand not the science, but the science you have all got. Whether you're in Singapore or Northern Ireland, we all got science around things that were related to planes, frontal plane, transverse plane, sagittal plane. Now, if I was on the street talking to somebody about movement and how we as humans move, the last thing on my mouth would be, a plane of movement, forward and back. I want to write this right now. This would be the last thing I talk about, forward and back. Can we write that down on your green sheet? Forward and back. That's today. Forward and back. That is, unfortunately, tied to a thing called sagittal. I said unfortunately, because there is no such thing as a sagittal, pure forward and back plane. But that's how we were taught. You have these axes of the body, you have these planes of the body. So I got to remember, Lisa, we got to go back and remember, we got to talk to people in terms of how they were taught. So I said, let's talk about 1 day on sagittal planes. We're going to talk about one day about sagittal septums. And I think you got it. Septal deviations, septal divisions, septal activity that really require forward and back to unravel, to grow, Lisa, to develop, to expand, to model, to move you. That's really biology. That's how every living organism out there, Damon, gets where it's going. Tensegrity of our body requires forward and back movement. It's a major principle. Tensegrity is a word that says, how are you held together? How are you formed? How are you positioned? What patterns you? That's really important. And keep this in mind. Biomimetic. Biomimetic means that when your body is moving forward on one side, it has to somehow move back on the other. Otherwise, you collapse. Now, these are concepts we should have got those, Gene, in school day one. Now, I'm not hardened over that. We aren't getting those concepts day one. It's very hard to teach that stuff. We're talking about novel brain stems. They're just trying to figure out the origin and insertion of a muscle. It's really cool stuff. I don't think our educational institutions are failing us at all, Dan. I think it's working perfectly the more I reflect on it. Sagittalism. Sagittalism is an expression of movement that goes forward and back. Okay. Day two on this, if I look at this correctly, Jen, it says we have this thing called frontal and transverse. And I'm going to throw some things out to you right now. Really, the words for frontal and transverse are seriously simple. Frontal, side to side. Why don't we write that down, okay? Side to side. We're going to show you some things today that has to work that way for you to move back and forward. They're called coils. They're called spheres. They're called masses. You have two of them. You have masses. They have to go from side to side for you to push and pull, for you to pump and draw, for you to suck and blow. Words that I know all of you are familiar with if you've been taking any of these primary courses. Side to side. Really important thing. We learned in school that was called a frontal plane. We won't talk about any axes. It was your frontal plane. There is no such thing as a frontal plane, but that's okay. Now, if you want to break it down to a frontal plane, you're not really going forward with mechanical biology. You're going forward with mechanical engineering. This is a biological engineered system. And I put biology in front of the engineer. Otherwise, you become a xenobot. You're a robot. You have two hemispheres on top of your head for this next word. For the next word, it's really important, this next word. In and out. Can you write that down? In and out. You move towards your body, you move away from your body. It's that simple. And you can't do that without rotation. That's called the transverse plane. You move in and you move out. One arm is going to go out, and if the other one goes out, you're not really rotating, you're just expressing yourself. You're expanding yourself. But if you want to move forward and if you want to create, one arm's got to go out and the other one's got to simultaneously do what, Dan? Come in. If you want to move yourself forward, Beth, one foot's got to go out while the other foot's got to stay what? Now we do, I think a pretty good job of that in a course called forward locomotor movement. But it doesn't really matter. We do a good job of that in every single primary course. In and out. It's called transverse plane. I got news for you. There is no such thing as a transverse plane. You've got them all through your bodies. You're going to see this morning. You got layers of them. Whatever moves in and inward in one direction somewhere in your body, the next plane above it and below it's got to do what? Otherwise, if you don't turn out, you're not moving in. You're moving in the same direction. We're working with people who are moving in the same direction at all three planes. They're anxious. Their airways are tight. They're resiliently strong. They lift weight. They stay brawny. See, my world of posture is a little different in terms of how I look at it, okay? It's all about tensegrity. Tensegrity means that inside your body, your brain is getting given messages. Inside your body, you are internally creating messages for your brain. And your brain picks up those messages as references, as correlations, as corollaries, and says, you must want to be patterned in that position. Day two. Day two talks about frontal and transverse planes. But the real part of this comes in day three, when we start talking about this magical word called flexion. Not extension. We all have to extend to unravel and to move and stay upright, but we can't do it without flexion. How can you extend if you first don't what? You write that down. How do you extend on extension? Doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. In order for you to move, you got to flex. The area that's got to flex is between this little thing called your sternum and this thing called the pube. That sternum and pube have a cavity. It's called thoraco-abdominal cavity. Those are your guts. Those guts are innervated by a brain called the vagal system. The vagal system is constantly feeding information about gas, about what you're doing with excrement and how you're moving your body to these two hemispheres that's also receiving what's going on in the thorax itself, called gas and airflow. Airflow here in this thoraco-abdominal cavity here, which is your pelvic bowl and your thoracic bowl that's turned upside down, has a little bit of an opening that you chomp with and you close with. I see wonderful temporalis muscles down here called obliques. They do a great job of chewing your food and digesting your systems and really help you out. Because the number one lateral mover of the body, Ryan, is your temporalis muscles. They're called obliques. They move you from side to side. They're your number one movers in a frontal plane. It's not your glutes. Are you kidding me? Your glutes are the best transverse rotators you'll ever have in your body. But these abdominal muscles are wonderful muscles for a word called opposition, just like your temporalis and masseter muscles are. And we're going to talk about polyarticular chains because of that. Because those temporalis muscles and those abdominal muscles are laying in a space that have to do one thing: flex you. Flex you. Contract and flex you. Flex your cranium, flex your abdomen, flex your thorax. We're going to talk about that on day 4. How important it is to flex so you can extend. Flex so you can re-extend. Flex so you can re-extend. A day on flexion called thoracic integration. That's really the meat and potatoes of the whole course, to be honest with you. It has nothing to do with the rib cage. It's important. The rib cage is very important. Those are piano keys. But flexion really has a lot to do with how well you can get air out of you, how well you can inhibit, how well you can, expand through this thing called inhalation. Can we write that down? Day 3 is a full day about inhalation, but it says flexion. Flexion is inhalation. Flexion is mediastinum expansion. Flexion is integration. Flexion is brightness. That's why it's a yellow color. It's important for all of us to remember that there's a meaning behind these 4 days. And it's not the same meaning we got when we went to school. And the last day, I saw a picture of a tree yesterday going to work. I'm going to take it and we're going to put it on day 4 for our scoliosis friends out there on Vine Street that says, it grew up because it was too close to another tree at an angle, produced a nice little right TMCC, right BC, left AIC pattern with the little PC activity going on. It's beautiful. At least I can't wait to show it to you. Our bodies are no secret to us. They are not a secret to you. They are talking to you. They are visually in front of you at all times. But what really postures me about posture, Samantha, is this lack of ability to understand. Jen, here I go. You okay? Jen, you gotta let me know if I'm moving around too much or.
Yep, I'll position it. And one thing is I'll take pictures of these whiteboards and I send it to you as well. So, but I'll zoom out here for you.
Kelly, how we doing? Can you hear me? Kelly, what is posture? I could go around the room. I've seen some definitions that I wrote over the years. Some of them I like, some of them I don't really like. Because see, Dan, when I write what defines posture, I'm thinking who asked the question. What do you want to hear? Beth, what do you want to hear this morning? You're an airway person. I'd be glad to talk to you about airway. You like to talk about, spirituality. I love to do that. What is posture? What shoes are you in? How did you get here? What schools did you go to? What education? Who's your mentor, by the way? How did you learn how to stand up? What parenting did you get or not? What is posture? Posture is simple. It's a position. That's it. It's the position you're in. Mentally, physically, biologically, genetically, psychologically, spiritually. It's a position. We talk about posture every day, and we have fun talking about politics and our football team, and we had one at one time, but our football team and our football team and unfortunately our football team. But what I'm trying to get across is what's ever on the table, what's ever in the news. You talk about it, it changes your life. Posture is who you're around. I think I posture people. I don't think I posture people always the right way. And I'm pretty sure what I say is not always agreed on by a large percent of those people who listen to us. And then you get a few that take a course, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, 15 people in the room are starting to talk to each other. And you know what? They're starting to talk to each other, and the community they talk to is in the same position. The same position. Did you know you have 2 diaphragms? Did you know you have 2 brains? Did you guys know that? Well, you're unique. You have a different posture than a lot of other people do. You're talking to dentists like you're a crazy woman or man, because dentists don't understand that you've got 2 mouths, 2 tongues, 2 sets of teeth, 2 ears that direct your eyeballs in terms of how you use your teeth. Very difficult to appreciate if you don't understand the word posture. It's not a physical word, because your physical world is controlled by the physiology that is corresponding with the dynamics that's received by your 2 brains. And those 2 brains put you in a position. Maybe you're an AFIR. Maybe you're in a position where you can't get off of one arm. I said that correctly, Dan. You can't get off of one arm. You're using your thorax guidance provided by an arm for posture. What is posture? So be careful when someone says, there's this institute in Lincoln, Nebraska called the Postural Restoration Institute. They talk about crazy stuff like extraocular eye muscles, like a big toe on one side. And you better buy shoes that have heels on them. And you make sure, whatever you do, make sure that your arms can internally rotate. They're kind of crazy. And then they sprinkle some things in there called inhalation and exhalation on top of a body that's got to go from side to side, in and out, up and down, forward and back. They're kind of weird. I checked my, I Google posture, and none of those things are under the word posture. Good morning, Jennifer Poulin. It's good to see you. So Jennifer, when we go back in our life and we start reflecting, what is it that we're really talking about? I'm sure many of you, Jennifer, in the room right now thinking, my attitude about posture is a lot different than it was 30 years ago, Jennifer. That first course I took, everything had to deal with the word hamstring. That was posture. Or everything had to deal with this thing called zone of apposition. That was posture. No, because you were mentored by someone who is trying to lay some groundwork that we could put a community together with, right? It's called a platform. Otherwise, you can't talk about posture. You go off into areas and you read authors who write about things that are related to posture, but have no meaning, no substance, if you can't understand tensegrity of the brain. It's called networking, connections. And that networking comes from two cortices, physical and physiological patterning that's provided by two cortical hemispheres. The only way you can stand someone else. Did you hear what I said? I didn't say stand on the floor. I said stand someone else upright. Is you have to understand there are two cortices. Therefore, thus the Institute. Because I can tell you how to stand, but that doesn't mean their two courses could give a, what about what you just said. If you can't communicate with them about how they sense their gut, how they sense their airway, how they sense airflow, gas flow. Because if they can't sense that, how are you going to tell them to stand up straight? Quit leaning and listing. Could you spend a little more time over here, which is what we're going to do the next 4 days? Really take a deep moment right now and dig deep inside your soul and really ask yourself, what is posture? Really do it for yourself. Don't do it for me, because that's what I did 35 years ago. I don't know what posture is. I can tell you posture is a lot of things that it's not in the literature I read, because you can't confine it and define it in a paragraph. It's spiritual, it's psychological, it's mental, it's cortical, it's physical, and it's definitely real. You have to get upright. Now, the reason I'm putting that on your plate, because these 4 days should be talking about that. How do we get someone to understand and recognize their own posture? How do we help them? What procedural technique are we going to give them that steers them, not you, not satisfies you as an operator, but satisfies them to experience themselves? That's posture.